Me now to look a little further into the outlook for Ukraine's economy. I'm joined by Josh Cohen. He is the former project director for economic reform programs in the former Soviet Union, and he's also a columnist for the Moscow Times. Josh, thanks for coming in.
My
I appreciate
pleasure.
your time. So Russia and Ukraine, they're on opposite sides of the military battlefield right now, also seem to be on opposite sides of a financial battle that's brewing with this IMF bailout. How did Ukraine get into this position where its very bailout could be endangered by a former Russian loan?
Well, it goes back actually about a year and a half ago, right before the former president Yanukovych was overthrown. There was essentially a tug of war between the EU and Russia as to which direction economically Ukraine would go. And Russia offered to sway Ukraine a $15 billion loan, of which the first $3 billion was dispersed in the form of a Eurobond, Ukrainian Eurobond that Russia has bought, and that's due at the end of this year.
Due at the end of this year.
2015.
So then what are the chances that the IMF is then forced to pull back its bailout because Ukraine can't pay up, or because Russia won't renegotiate the terms of at least that $3 billion Eurobond?
It's a little bit up in the air at this point, right? The IMF has some fairly strict rules that private sector debt will not necessarily eliminate a country's possibility to have a bailout, but public sector, bilateral country-to-country debt will do so. And so there's been a big tug of war among Russia and Ukraine and analysts about whether Ukraine's debt is considered bilateral, that is owed country to country, or whether it's private sector because it's in the form of a Eurobond. And this very uncertainty is actually to Russia's advantage and to Kiev's disadvantage.
Is there any wiggle room there with the interpretation, or is it pretty cut and dry?
I think there ultimately is some wiggle room, and I think the IMF is going to find some wiggle room just because...
They'd like to find it.
They're going to find it,
okay.
I'm almost certain, because politically there's so much pressure to make this loan and to stabilize Ukraine. They'll come up with some type of wiggle room. It may have to do with the fact that this is a Eurobond, technically, rather than a direct finance ministry to finance ministry transaction. It was also done by, the Eurobond was bought by one of Russia's sovereign wealth funds, which again is a little bit different.
Okay.
So I predict they will ultimately find the wiggle room.
There's also the matter of Ukraine renegotiating another about $15 billion with other creditors. How's that process going?
It's just begun, and I suspect it's going to be some very long and hard ongoing negotiations. Both the Ukrainians, Finance Minister Yaresko has already hired an investment bank, and the creditors have as well. Interestingly enough, the biggest creditor of Ukraine in terms of on the private sector side is actually a big U.S. investment fund named Franklin Templeton that owns almost half of Ukraine's Eurobonds. And it's going to play a very big role in this. And at this point, it's unclear what direction things are going to go.
Part of the package is also the $17.5 billion IMF loan that's been given to Ukraine. What are they doing with it, and is it being put to good use, in your view, to prop up the economy?
That loan was basically just signed, and so there's been an initial $5 billion dispersed, which literally was just at the point where Ukraine was about to run out of foreign currency reserves, right? And then there will be further disbursements over the course of the year, presuming that Ukraine meets certain reform targets for energy, as your report just said, for energy reforms and other areas of
long term, how much more money does Ukraine need?
Oh, it's difficult to say at this point. The existing package, it's a very deep hole. The existing package is $40 billion if you include the IMF money, some additional money, bilateral money from the EU and the US in the forms of either direct payments or loan guarantees, plus the $15 billion that they're theoretically going to renegotiate with their creditors. Whether that will be enough, it's hard to say. Last year it was $17 billion, and it's already been coming back to the table as needing more, so we'll just have to see. It's a big hole, though.
Yeah, lots of people watching as we're watching the military engagements as well. Thanks for your time tonight, Josh Cohen.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jessica.